The biggest question we have, the United States of America is still a nation committed to freedom and opportunity for all. We've had tests before: Watergate, McCarthy era, a civil war, the change from an agricultural economy to an industrial economy. We're now in a moment when all of us have to ask, what can we do to help this nation continue to be a model for the world? I want to tell you that I'm running to be Attorney General because I believe the answer lies here in Colorado. All right, I'm going to go with this one, and then we'll figure out the rest later. If anyone here read David Brooks's article earlier this week, you saw the distinction between weavers and rippers. Rippers represent people like the shooter at a synagogue on Saturday. Rippers are people who say there's such a thing as good Nazis. Weavers is the member of that synagogue who took care of the shooter. The members of the mosque who raise money to restore the synagogue. The challenge of this year: who's going to win? What Roger Cohen said in Sunday's New York Times was a question, but he also offered an answer. The question was, can Colorado save America? My answer: absolutely. And let me give you my reasons why, but let me first put on the table my biases or my bases for hope. First, for 18 months, I've been traveling around Colorado. I've been to every county, most of them multiple times, to listen to people, to learn what people want. And that experience has made me more optimistic than ever in the project of self-governance that began with our Constitution in Philadelphia 231 years ago. But my deep optimism also comes from my family history, because I'm a first-generation American who doesn't take for granted any elements of the commitment to opportunity and freedom that is my America. My grandparents and mom came here in 1951 as refugees, having survived the Holocaust. In fact, my mom was born in a concentration camp in Nazi Germany on April 13, 1945. The next day, the U.S. Army liberated my mom and my grandmother. So in this moment, we need to know what America is. America are the liberators at Buchenwald. America is the nation that welcomed my grandparents and mom here. America is not a nation who separates families at the border rather than give asylum seekers due process of law. Colorado, I believe, represent what's best about America. And at a moment when Washington, D.C. is as dysfunctional as we can possibly imagine, you've got to look to the states and leadership from states like Colorado. What Colorado represents, and this is Roger Cohen's observation, but I agree, Colorado is a place where people are more interested in problem solving than scoring political points. I've traveled the state to very conservative parts and talked about how do we manage water in a time of climate change. How do we address the opioid epidemic that destroys lives, families, and communities, and reform our criminal justice system in the process? And how do we address climate change? These are challenges that we can take on here in Colorado. What John Hickenlooper, our governor, said, quoted in this article, is in Colorado, you've got an inclination to sit down with those with whom you disagree, and the only way to persuade them is to listen harder. Roy Romer, former governor, had a different way of getting at the same point. which is all truth is partial. None of us can see all the truth, which means we need leaders with empathy and humility and a commitment to problem solving. That's America. That's what I want to work on to prove our democracy can work and can work in ways to meet the challenges of the 21st century. Let me talk about a few issues, then engage Steve in a conversation. Ideally, we can get some questions from you all too. I want to talk about entrepreneurship. I want to talk about water, oil and gas, and the opioid epidemic. First, entrepreneurship. We in Colorado are pioneering an effort called Startup Colorado. This actually started when I was working for President Obama in the White House. It was then the Startup America Partnership. When I came back to Colorado, I agreed with a venture capitalist friend of mine, Brad Feld, to build Startup Colorado. The premise there was that we could tie together Denver, Boulder, Fort Collins, Colorado Springs, and share ideas and work together. Denver Startup Week is now one of the largest startup weeks in the United States. That came directly from Startup Colorado because Boulder had started it first. We also did a program called Startup Summer, getting college students working in entrepreneurial companies in Colorado Springs, Denver, Boulder, and other ways to engage people in entrepreneurship. The Front Range now has a stronger and more interconnected entrepreneurial community. That was the easy part. The hard part is how do we encourage and enable entrepreneurship in Craig, Colorado on the western slope, or Alamosa in the San Luis Valley, or Sterling on the Eastern Plains. Here's the premise. If we continue to see the trend of a rural-urban divide, it's going to be toxic to our society and politics. And in fact, when people say, Phil, do you want Amazon coming to Colorado? I say absolutely to Pueblo and Grand Junction, because that's where we need more growth, more entrepreneurial energy. Grand Junction is a fabulous place to start a company, and so is Pueblo. We need to see about supporting an entrepreneurial community in those places, putting energy behind it, and helping to support those communities with mentors from the Front Range. That's what this initiative, which is a public-private partnership, is committed to doing, and something that I'm very passionate about advancing as a model for what our nation needs. Number two, water. We have less of it. We have more people. We can't deficit finance water. This is a challenge. What we can do is lead the way in innovation with more sustainable technologies and practices, including conservation, including demand-side management, new storage opportunities, and reuse. We also will have reasonable transfer mechanisms, but this is a delicate area. In its worst form, you have what's called buy and dry, where you literally shut down an entire community. Crowley County is worth going to. I've been there twice in this campaign. They used to have a vibrant agriculture sector. They sold 92% of the water rights to Colorado Springs. They don't have agriculture in Crowley County. Their number one source of jobs, prisons. To make it more painful, when I asked Joe Zemba on the Ordway City Council, which prison would you want to shut down first, the private prison or the public prison? He said, oh, the public prison, because the private prison at least pays taxes, and the people who work there live here. We need to provide hope to the Crowley counties, and we can't allow their existing agricultural communities to be destroyed, but we can do innovative things like switching from potatoes to hemp, saving water and using it elsewhere. That's the leadership we need on issues like water. On oil and gas, right now we're in a moment seeing a lot more heat than light. If you talk to people in the oil and gas industry and they have never heard the term social license to operate, that's a big problem. Because the anger that we're seeing is people asking, why is it that my kid goes to school 600 feet from an operation where I see smoke and I call to complain and no one answers the phone? That's how you lose your social license to operate. Unfortunately, our current situation, exacerbated by an attorney general who's acted in times as if she was the lawyer for the oil and gas industry, is not to listen and work with communities, but to sue them. My commitment is to work to solve problems, to build best practice so that as we have oil and gas development across our state, it's safe and it protects the public health. That's the sort of leadership John Hickenlooper brought on a rule governing methane emissions, where he brought the industry to the table and said, you've got a chance to talk to us. How could you capture methane in a way that works for you and protects our environment? And we came up with a national model rule on this, and the EPA and the Interior Department both adopted it. Now they're both trying to undo it, an action being challenged by state attorneys general, but that's another story. Let me get to the opioid epidemic and then engage Steve in a little bit of a conversation, because I really want this to be interactive. If people here haven't gotten to look at the damage it's doing, you need to. If you haven't read about Purdue Pharma, trust me, I'm not sure you can find a more socially irresponsible company out there. They knew how highly addictive OxyContin was and decided to lie to people to make money. They will be held accountable, and therein lies the challenge. And if you're looking for a socially responsible business, try helping people who are dependent on opioids rebuild their life through treatment and rehabilitation. We need to get the money from that settlement and put it into drug treatment to help people rebuild their lives. And we need to reorient our criminal justice system, because right now, far too many people are being put in jail when treatment is such a more humane and effective option. Last Sunday I was with Robert Jackson, the sheriff of the Alamosa County Jail, and 92% of the people in his jail are opioid users. He says, I can't help them. I don't have drug treatment here. We've got to do better. And that gives us the leading edge of reforming our criminal justice system, because we shouldn't be putting more money into prisons, and private prisons in particular. We should be finding alternatives to incarceration, like working on a farm in the San Luis Valley, or outdoor recreation, creating more hope and opportunity for people. This is a moment when our country has the opportunity to learn, to turn away from the politics of divisiveness and fear, and towards problem solving, working together as weavers to build communities that we can be proud of, that we can pass on to our kids a planet they can live in, democracy and rule of law that works, and opportunities ahead because we have done the work we need to do as good stewards. I don't take that all for granted, but as I said, I'm optimistic, and I'm very optimistic that we will lead the way here in Colorado. Thank you.
Thank you. Is this on now? Yep. So it's a wide-ranging set of issues. Let me ask about a sort of generalized theme. We, back in the days when we were regulators, when I was a regulator, one of the things that you always knew about is that you could try to regulate out of existence bad things, but you had to compete into existence good things. And the best you could do in government or as regulators is to basically get out of the way and let the private sector compete into existence good things. A lot of people in this room look at SRI from two perspectives. One is excluding or being activists with regard to companies that are doing bad things, and at the same time having impactful investments with regard to entrepreneurs or other companies doing good things. You've talked about some of the entrepreneurial side of things. One of the issues that came up in Jeremy Grantham earlier presentation today was the notion that there's a great amount of externalities. An awful lot of companies do a very good job. In the case of pharma companies that sell drugs that they know are addictive and are going to hurt people, but they don't pay the cost for the hurt. They get the benefits and the profits from the addiction. Fracking companies, oil companies, same kind of thing, et cetera, over and over again. What is it that government can do? What is it that you could do going forward that would allow for the social costs, the non-direct costs that companies basically impose on others, the externalities that they push out, to actually be re-internalized and be forced back into the company? So in essence, you have the market trying to actually make things good again.
I hope you... Is this working or...
Okay.
Let's try this one.
Can I take this thing off?
I hope you keep inviting me back for this conversation. Let me give you my priors on this. I have been a student of law and economics since I was in undergrad, and I have been an entrepreneur since I've been an undergrad. I've been interested in public policy, and I believe you can have public policy informed by rigorous economics and implemented through entrepreneurial initiative to achieve exactly the goal you just set out. Let me first echo a little bit of the warning you said, and I'll offer two laws that often are disregarded by lawyers and by regulators. The law of supply and demand and the law of unintended consequences. It's very important that we think about incentives, both holding people accountable for doing bad things and encouraging good things. At its best, the law as a tool is rigorous, at least on the first point, which is when someone does something bad, you can hold them accountable. If they've caused harms, causer, we identify what they've done that's caused the harm, and we hold them accountable for it. And then we have the harder challenge of how do we create incentives for fixing it. In the case of pharma, they are going to be held accountable for their role in the opioid epidemic. The bad actions are documented clearly. The challenge is going to be an administrative one of this class action lawsuit and other litigation like the tobacco. How do you bring this to a close? But then the harder one is how do you create incentives with government to do what is necessary, which is create more drug treatment programs. And right now, government is doing more to harm some of that, for example, in the licensing rules for drug treatment operators, than it is to enable it. As for other problems where you have to overcome public choice pressures, this is an issue. Because sometimes those companies are extremely well versed in working the regulatory system not to be held accountable. If we can show that we can build rules, like the methane rule here, at its best, you start from the principle, we need you to take account of these externalities, methane emissions, but we're not going to be stupid about how we do it. So at its worst, government, I shouldn't say there are many worse, but one worse version is government's well-intentioned, but then does a terrible job implementing the concern, the law of unintended consequences. It doesn't actually address the concern. It just puts a lot of cost on industry and hasn't really solved the problem. So you really have to start with both the analytical rigor to understand what's the externality, what's the harm, how do I hold some accountable, but then you've got to have the entrepreneurial capability to build a system. And you may not get it exactly right the first time. You may have to iterate. So whether it's oil and gas or whether it's pharma, you're addressing the core concern and helping to solve the problem. And finally, you have to have a mindset, I'm not trying to play political games. I'm trying to solve problems. I honestly, if I'm successful, a lot of other people, county commissioners, state regulators, the governor, state legislature, they can get all the credit in the world, but if we're moving forward as Colorado, then we all win.
By the way, we can't really see if there are people out there who want to ask questions. So if you want to ask a question, if you could raise your hand and...
Or just stand up.
Yeah, or maybe jump up and down a little bit, or calisthenics, something. But so a couple of other questions if nobody else has one out there yet, but you all should be speaking up. I've not seen this group bashful before.
And I'm not afraid to call people either.
Oh,
we got a couple, Steve. Good job.
Okay. I can't see anything, but whoever you are, go ahead.
I can see him.
Okay.
Hello?
There you go.
Hello?
Go ahead.
Hi, Sam Adams with Vert Asset Management.
I don't think we can hear you.
I can hear him, so I can still repeat the question. Go ahead.
Colorado is a state that's very rich in potential renewable energy, and you didn't mention that. It's also a state that has a lot of oil and gas interests. Are you being nice to the gas industry because it's before the election, and are you, after the election, going to really, switch us over? I mean, this is the place where you could show some leadership, and it's cheaper, better, faster, stronger, cleaner, healthier. Let's do it.
So this is the first time I've been asked the question, am I being nice to the oil and gas industry? I don't believe if they were in this room, they'd say Phil Weiser is our preferred candidate. He's nice to us. I have said to them, I will hold them accountable to be socially responsible, which is not exactly music to their ears. But I do believe it's the right thing to do, and the only way they have a future is to be socially responsible. As for your question about the longer term, which is moving to a renewable energy economy, Colorado has been an absolute leader in that area. We adopted a clean jobs commitment, which has meant we've switched from coal to natural gas, wind, and solar. And so our carbon footprint was such that when we got the Clean Power Plan, it was sleeves off our vest. We were like, yeah, we're doing that already. Colorado will continue to be that sort of leader. And part of what we have to do is build the infrastructure to support it. To get to the next step of relying on renewables, we need storage like you wouldn't believe. Maybe those in the weeds would believe it. We need to make sure we build the infrastructure for storage across our whole state, including for electric vehicles. I'm committed on several fronts. One is how we drive that path forward. I'm committed how do we keep the structures in place at the federal level, which started back from a lawsuit by state AGs called Massachusetts versus EPA that told the EPA it had an obligation under the Clean Air Act to regulate carbon as harmful to human health. So that is my commitment. We will keep moving in that direction. And for the foreseeable future, we're going to be using oil and gas. And I'd rather have us developing in the United States than trying to import it from Saudi Arabia. I'm also committed that if we're going to do it here, we're going to do it in a way that is respectful of communities, of the public health, and is safe. And again, that's where the industry gets nervous. But frankly, what has happened in Colorado has been an anger that I think is a wake-up call. The response to that is oversight, and there's only one candidate in this race who's committed to that. It's me.
So where does government draw the line? How do you know when it's time for government to try to step in and regulate, and when it's time for the private sector to figure out a way to solve a problem?
My background in antitrust gives me a powerful toolkit because my first order question is, can the market work? Are there market failures? And one of the powerful efforts you guys are doing is creating markets to do good things, to provide public goods. I am very bullish on these opportunities. You could add things like social impact bonds as a way to help, let's say, invest in programs that reduce recidivism, people getting rearrested and put back in jail, and let's create economic incentives so that we're not continuing to put more and more people in jail. So my first orientation is, how can you do that? In some cases, you need command and control because you're not going to achieve that goal through incentives. So you have to have that as well. If there's certain types of behaviors that are just harmful, you have to say, we're not going to allow that. So, for example, I don't think we can trust everyone with a gun. So we should have background checks. That's a command and control requirement we need to put into place. The importance that I would have is, I want us to always be rigorous and always committed to examining our premises. Because too often, government starts on one path, and they stay on that path, never asking, wait a minute, are the premises still justified? Is there another way? So a real hero of mine is Fred Kahn, who looked at the airline industry and said, wait a minute, what we're doing as regulators is facilitating a cartel that hurts consumers. And so I don't have an a priori answer. For me, it's one of constant re-examination and experimentation to make sure that whatever regulatory systems we have are the right ones.
Yes, over there.
Greetings, I'm Leslie Strape from it. I got a lemon. Back to that oil and gas thing. I fully appreciate that you might be a more kinder and gentler candidate to the environment and to the children and grandchildren of the state of Colorado than Brand X. I'm having a very difficult time accepting words like safe and socially responsible in the same sentence of burning fossil fuels. I think most of us would agree, and I'd like to know if you'd agree, you can capture every molecule of methane, but when you burn the gas and when you burn the oil, you are exacerbating this horrible problem of climate change. So I think the words matter. I understand that this is a difficult problem to solve, but I'd really like to hear whether you, in your heart of hearts, can use that vocabulary and feel that you're being completely honest with yourself and with us.
So here's being honest. If everyone not driving a car that is completely electric is willing to stop driving, I'm with you. But we're not there. We have not electrified with 100% renewables. Until we do that, and I want to do that as soon as we possibly can, we are using oil and gas. If we're using oil and gas and we're taking it from the ground, I'm going to do everything I can to make sure it's safe and protects the public health. This is a challenge in our vocabulary, which is to be grounded in the reality, which is not everything that's happening that we don't like, we can snap our fingers and stop. We've got to work together to move in the direction that serves our next generation. And part of how people get cynical is they say, oh, we're not making progress fast enough, I'm not going to try at all. I'm deeply committed to working from reality, in reality, to protect the goals, including sustainability. And again, as I said, we're still using oil and gas, and so we have this issue. The other thing I would just say is the discipline of having to listen to people whose livelihood depends on oil and gas is important, because what we didn't do right in this state on coal is we sunset coal without building sustainable job opportunities for people in those communities. Part of the anger that got us Donald Trump in 2016 was a lot of communities and a lot of workers who felt the economy changed in ways that hurt them and that no one cared about them. My commitment is to care about everyone in every community, and as we make transitions, whether it's automated vehicles so that 15 million people who earn their living driving lose their jobs, or away from coal, or away from other sources of energy, we need to be thinking about how we support people. And with respect to the transition away from coal, I can tell you there are communities in our state where people have lost, are losing jobs, where schools are losing their tax base, and I'm not proud of how we did that.
Yes.
I think last question.
We've got one over there.
I'm coming for you.
Gabriel Malik from Yale University. I'm interested in what legal options are if Colorado votes no on Proposition 1 of sort of solutions would you consider?
For those outside of Colorado politics, you don't know about 112, which would have a mandatory 2,500-foot setback for any oil and gas drilling operations. If it doesn't pass, the question is, what do we do? Assuming I'm the Attorney General, part of what we do is actually use the law as a tool to protect people, as opposed to what has happened with our past Attorney General as a tool to protect the oil and gas industry. What do I mean by that? Our past Attorney General sued Boulder County when they were working on an ordinance to ensure safe oil and gas development and protect the public health. She did that, by the way, without talking to them first, which for a lawyer is a cardinal sin. I have told people I won't sue anybody unless you're a fly-by-night company until I sit down with you and say, I've got this serious concern, we're looking at litigation, what do you have to say? What I want to do is set up a unit in the AG's office to advise and support local communities who are going to develop memorandums of understanding, surface use agreements that are going to protect their water, protect their air, make sure that any operations are safe. There are a lot of tools we have under Colorado law. If we need more of them, then we'll work to go to the legislature to get more of them. That's going to be one key element at the local level. There's also a Colorado Oil and Gas Conservation Commission, which has been given bad legal advice by our Attorney General, who told them they lacked authority under current law to protect the public health, safety, and environment. In other words, our AG read out of the law critical provisions. She lost that court case, but she's doubled down, and she's now appealed it to the Colorado Supreme Court. I would give clear and appropriate legal advice that our Colorado Oil and Gas Commission can act in ways that promote the public health, safety, and welfare. Part of the anger driving 112 is people seeing their Attorney General against them, not working with them. When I'm Attorney General, I will turn that around.
Thank you. I know we're out of time, so I've been told that we can't take any more questions, but Phil can stay around for
Yeah, I'll
a
be
while.
around for the reception. My critical message is this. We've got incredible challenges. We've talked about oil and gas. The water challenges are as formidable or more formidable. The opioid epidemic, reforming criminal justice. These are critical societal challenges. The work you're doing is critical to our path. It has to be working together. That's my commitment, so I hope you keep inviting me back. I'm open to all ideas. We're fighting to make our democracy work, to show that government can work. I believe Colorado is the best laboratory democracy in the nation. Thank you for coming here for this conference. Look forward to continued dialogue. Thank you all very much.
Is this back on? Yeah. Please find Phil for any additional follow-up questions. We're running very late, so we're going to give you a very quick and condensed version of what was supposed to be happening in the last 15 minutes. Am I using both microphones? So I'll keep using this one. We have something that we showed very briefly last year that was an idea in the making. It was really just the intent to try to see if we could transform this conference from an annual conference into a continuing movement, something that would actually have continuity to it year-long, that would be part of a community building up. It's why we changed the name from just the conference to Conference and Community. It's what we intend to do. So we're in a state of transition. This conference is going to be, we hope, transitioned to a much broader audience, to a much greater group of people that we can touch with the ideas of social, responsible, sustainable, responsible, impactful investing, so that we're in a position to be able to actually influence the world in a much greater way than we might if it was only constrained to folks who do it full time. There are a lot of people out there who want to invest in SRI-related activities for part-time, and we want to encourage that as well. We'd love everybody to do it 100% all the time, but we'll take even partially people caring about some of these issues. So one of the things we want to do is start to think about how we can enable more of the community, more motivation, more activism, more conversation, more discussion, more interchange of expertise by using technology. And so we've got an app, and we've built this app, and it's free. You can get it and start looking at it. It's in the Apple Store, it's in the Android Store. It's in beta in those places, so it doesn't fully work yet. It's online at www.sriconsensus.com, and you'll be able to see more there. But we wanted to just give you a quick video of some of it, and then we'll stop right after the video. So can we go to the slide first? We'll just do the quick PowerPoint slide. Hello? If we can do the quick PowerPoint slide. If we can't do the PowerPoint slide, we'll just go to the video. And if we can't go to the video, I can sing and dance up here. But that'll be really bad. So, okay, here's the slide. What we have in the video, and this shows you how fast things are changing. In the video, we actually have information and data that's based on the most recent then available information and data. That information and data is now already out of date because yesterday US CIF provided some updated information which was materially different from the information we have in the video. So we just wanted to highlight the updated information. The bottom line though is that the sort of SRI investments area has grown from about 8.7 trillion in 2016 to over 12 trillion now. That's a remarkable, almost 40% increase in the amount of assets invested in this space. Not only is it $1 and $4 in terms of professional management, but it's also now reaching retail and high net worth investors, a lot of the folks who are clients of people in this room. And that's now at $3 trillion in investable assets. Just huge. It's absolutely unequivocally huge. Mutual funds have grown to about $2.5 trillion, up 34% over the last couple of years. And even more interestingly, in a certain sense perhaps, ETFs that are in the SRI ESG space have now more than doubled. There were about 25 in 2016. It's now close to 70 at this point. So really pretty phenomenal growth in the space. But let's now go to the video to show you one of the things that we're trying to accomplish and trying to make available to you. And then we can talk more about this over the course of the next day or two as people see fit. I know we're standing between networking and dinner as well. So can we go to the video and just cue that?
$8.7 trillion was invested using one or more SRI strategies in 2016. That's 1 out of every $5 under management in the U.S., representing a 33% increase since 2014. 80% of the world's largest corporations use responsible investing standards, and 75% of investors are interested in integrating SRI into their investment practices, and for good reason. Sustainable, responsible, and impact investing, SRI, is one of the fastest growing investment categories. From climate change, supply chain practices, and workplace policies, to equal pay, discrimination, diversity, and gender violence, investors' SRI strategies have evolved. SRI today is much more than excluding obvious bad actors. It now also focuses on identifying and investing in companies that can ignite lasting environmental, social, and governance change. Women and millennials are two populations driving the increase in SRI investing. That social focus is expanding to the broader investment community, which, now more than ever, as government shifts its focus, is standing up and embracing a proactive social investment approach. And we who serve those investors need to deliver. We ourselves need to embrace technology and new ideas to offer the innovations that match the passions of our clients. The data and methodology that drive SRI investment decisions is often incomplete, expensive, and opaque, and judgmental without support, unidimensional and limited. Frequently left out are the disparate but informed views of the real-life SRI practitioners and clients who know more, and who collectively can make a great difference. In addition, there is a need for a community that grows, communicates, and motivates. Changing the world takes real effort and devotion. We're all here to do our part. Let's embrace the tools that will leverage our effort. Introducing Consensus. Consensus was created to amplify the voice of the SRI movement, to unearth emerging needs of SRI investors, and to provide data, information, and tools to make a difference. Consensus is a best-in-class crowdsourced data aggregator. Consensus is a means to communicate and motivate. Consensus is a place to let experts add their expertise and for knowledge to spread. Consensus is a mechanism to make accessible the data needed to inform an SRI focus. Consensus is a means to influence companies to do the right things and to be rewarded when they do. Consensus is a platform to make the world a little better place. An unlimited range of SRI categories ranked by relevance to the community. Vetted security lists that reflect both expertise and collective wisdom. You contribute to the community. Comment or suggest corrections on categories and securities already there, or suggest your own additions. Exchange ideas and post comments on categories and securities, and read and contribute to the latest news on critical topics to the SRI community. And this is all just for starters, with lots more to come. Upcoming features include thought leadership, additional data and analytics streams, new ESG resources, topic-centric group discussions, and subscription programs. We are all the future of SRI investing. Combining technology with your ideas and investment expertise allows us all to contribute so much more, not only to the service we provide our clients, but to the reason our clients care, to matter. Stay tuned, as there's a lot more to come. Thank you. www.sriconsensus.com.
The bottom line is we, like you, care a lot about this, and we want to make this something that we can actually continue for the year and motivate people. I don't think there's ever been a time where it's been more critical for people to stand up and do what's right. I think that this is really the time when people have to actually do something and make their voices really heard. So we hope that we can do our little part of it, and we hope everybody else can join in. So thanks very much. And at this point, I think we go to the reception and the networking.